She's made up her mind to live pretty smart. Learn to budget responsibly right from the start. She spends a little less and puts more into savings. Keeps her blood pressure low and credit score raises. She's cutting debt right out of her life. She tracks her cash flow on a spreadsheet at night.
Boring money moves make kind of lame songs, but they sound pretty sweet to your wallet. PNC Bank, brilliantly boring since 1865.
Rated T for teen.
Each year, thousands of adults lose their shred. It's an epidemic simply known as shred loss. But it doesn't have to be this way, because rekindling your shred is as easy as playing the new Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4. With new parks, cross-platform multiplayer, and sick new game modes, we can put an end to shred loss everywhere. Get the new Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 and show the world that the shred's not dead. Get Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 available now.
I could start today's show a whole lot of places, but I'm going to start here.
Trump administration officials have told CBS News the U.S. could soon start deporting migrants to Libya. Flights to the north.
Do you remember this moment? It was back in May. At the time, it was breaking news that the Trump administration was considering sending immigrants to a war-torn country, a country they'd never been to.
Well, the main objective here, John, is deterrence. The Trump administration wants to send a strong message to the world, really, that if you come to the U.S. illegally or stay here unlawfully, not only can you face deportation to your home country, but you could also be sent across the Atlantic to a troubled African country like Libya. And they are talking to several countries in the African.
These flights to Libya, they got called off. But it turns out that is not where this story ends. I know that because of an immigration lawyer named Jonathan Ryan. He is part of a network of attorneys. They call each other up when their clients get sent to facilities close by. They check in on folks in detention.
I tend to be the guy in San Antonio because I've been working in and out of that detention center in Pearsall, Texas, since it opened in 2005.
The Pearsall Detention Center is where the people who were supposed to be on that flight to Libya ended up. Jonathan met with 13 of these people from Vietnam, Laos, Mali, Burundi, Mexico. And then there was this Burmese man named Nyo Myint. Like all these individuals, he'd been convicted of a crime, in his case sexual assault, and he'd been ordered to be removed from the country. But because he was a refugee, he couldn't return home. Within a day, you were getting notified that Nyo Myint and others were being moved around, right?
That's right. I met him on a Friday, and the next day I got a notification that he had been transferred to a different detention center about 4 hours south of San Antonio in the Rio Grande Valley.
Was that a red flag of some kind?
Certainly. Of the group of people I met with, this is the only individual who was transferred. And so I knew pretty quickly that something was up.
The U.S. government, it turned out, had changed its mind about Nyo Myint. Instead of sending him to Libya, they were sending him to South Sudan. Jonathan heard from his client one last time, a hurried phone call.
And it only lasted for about 20 seconds.
What did he want to tell you?
Well, he just had enough time to say that he had received some papers that he refused to sign and something about removal. When you think about the chain of events that I decided on that Friday to go down to the detention center, I was honestly thinking on Thursday night of going on Monday. But I just said, no, who knows what'll happen? I'll go down on Friday. And had I not met with that group of people on that day, it's quite possible that we never would have known about these removals of these 8 individuals to South Sudan.
Because you were his attorney of record, so they had to tell you?
That's correct. That just shows the delicate nature of this system and how much could be happening that we are not aware of.
Today on the show, the inside story of one man's experience getting kicked out of the country. Where does that leave the rest of us? I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. Decisions made in Washington can affect your portfolio every day. But what policy changes should investors be watching? Listen to Washington Wise, an original podcast for investors from Charles Schwab, to hear the stories making news in Washington right now. Host Mike Townsend, Charles Schwab's managing director for legislative and regulatory affairs, takes a nonpartisan look at the stories that matter most to investors, including policy initiatives for retirement savings, taxes and trade, inflation concerns, the Federal Reserve, and how regulatory developments can affect companies, sectors, and even the entire market. Mike and his guests offer their perspective on how policy changes could affect what you do with your portfolio. Download the latest episode and follow at schwab.com/WashingtonWise, or wherever you listen. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are the things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations. It might sound shocking that the government's able to send people to countries that they have no connection to. But Jonathan Ryan wanted to make something clear almost as soon as we got on the line. The Trump administration did not invent this practice of shipping immigrants to third-party countries.
This is a regulation that has been on the books for a very long time. Was it used? No, not like it's being signaled now. But the regulations that governs immigration in the United States says that the United States can remove someone to a third country. That means it's not the country that someone is from. It's not the country that an immigration judge has ordered them removed to, in the case that it is impracticable, impossible, or inadvisable for them to be sent there.
That's pretty broad.
It's very broad and it's very fuzzy, frankly. I mean, what does inadvisable mean? I mean, impossible, okay. I think that has a pretty obvious definition, but impracticable? I mean, that could just mean it was somewhat difficult. You know, we called the consulate and they didn't answer our first phone call. Okay, impracticable. We're going to remove you to this other country. So unfortunately, there's a lot of laws and regulations already in the books that this current administration is merely taking advantage of to ramp up the current enforcement and removal operations that it intends to use to engage in mass deportations.
Once Jonathan and some of his fellow immigration lawyers learned that the Trump administration had put his client and 7 other men on a flight to South Sudan with almost no advance notice, the group rushed to get in front of a federal judge.
The National Immigrant Litigation Alliance, or NILRA, was quick in filing motions to prevent their ultimate removal to South Sudan. And so their airplane hopscotched around the world. I believe it stopped off in Ireland, and I think then in Dubai before ultimately landing in Djibouti.
To a U.S. military base?
That's right.
How are they kept, your client and others, on the military base?
From what we understand, they were held inside of a container unit for the entire 6 weeks that they were there. I could only imagine those conditions: sparse, hot, dusty. They were on a military base, and even the ICE officials who were guarding them reportedly were complaining of becoming sick because of the burn pits, the mosquitoes. The conditions were extraordinarily harsh. And if the ICE officials who were guarding them were making complaints about becoming sick and having to deal with the conditions, you can only imagine what it would have been like to be one of those individuals who was being kept shackled for the entire time that they were there.
We should just explain, before we go much further, what the government says about your client and the other men that it wanted to remove to third-party countries. I mean, they don't mince words. They say these men are criminals. To be specific, your client in particular, he's convicted of first-degree sexual assault involving a victim mentally and physically incapable of resisting. So for them, they look at your client and they say, why advocate for him to remain in this country? You know, he did something terrible. He already had an order of removal against him. When you hear that, what do you say?
It's clear that our government cherry-picked a small group of people exactly for this purpose, so that they could broadcast their criminal convictions and histories as an excuse, but I would say more as a diversion to direct our attention away from the fact that the government itself was breaking the law, was breaking domestic law and international law. Nobody's disputing the fact that these individuals, my client included, had criminal convictions. Now, my client was also adjudicated incompetent to stand trial several times when he was himself undergoing his criminal process. And nobody doubts that these individuals have orders of removal. The question is not about those individuals. The question at the heart of this is whether the United States government has the right to disappear people with no due process, no judicial review, no transparency to any country in the world, no matter how dangerous, no matter if the people they send there could be subject to torture, to degrading conditions, and potentially death if they're thrown into the middle of a civil war. That's what this is about.
But you yourself have said that these laws existed on the books about removing people to third-party countries. So what's different about the experience here with your client?
The difference is the removal of all process, of all judicial review, and the lightning speed at which the government is conducting these operations. Who is going to interpret what those words mean? You know, people who are being sent to a third country that is not one they are from, that is not the country that they were ordered removed from, must be afforded an opportunity, a meaningful opportunity, to express their fear of being sent to a country where they could be subject to torture.
How much do you know about South Sudan? Like, I imagine you see this documentation presented to your client saying, we're going to try to send you to South Sudan. And you must think, like, hold it, what do I know about that? Where is he headed? What did you find out?
Well, I think there's interesting parallels, let's say, just between Libya and South Sudan, the two countries we know they tried and ultimately succeeded in sending him to, is that these are countries that are in the middle of or on the precipice of full-blown civil war. These are countries that are filled with unrest, with unstable, weak governments in charge, countries that are known for harsh prison conditions, government-sponsored torture, rebel groups that could overrun government facilities and take control over prisoners. And so you could say I know a lot more about South Sudan today than I did back in May. And what I've learned is not comforting. It's quite scary.
The United States warns American citizens about going to South Sudan, right?
South Sudan is at the highest level of travel warning. It is a level 4 do not travel country. If you go to the Department of State's website and you look up South Sudan, you will see with a red banner on top of the screen, do not travel to this country. Yet our government wants to send these individuals and potentially more to this country. And that's what's at the heart of this, is that this is not about protecting anyone from individuals with criminal backgrounds. This is about punishing people, right? These individuals have already been through, my client included, have already been through the criminal process. They've already served their time. Yet clearly these people are being punished individually. And on top of that, it's obvious that our government is purposefully sending these individuals to the most dangerous countries possible in order to send a message. And the first audience to that message are, of course, immigrants in the United States. But more and more, we are hearing clear statements from this administration that whatever they are doing to immigrants now, they are looking at doing to United States citizens next.
After the break, what happened to Jonathan's client when the Supreme Court got involved?
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
This episode is brought to you by Avid Reader Press. Legendary investor Ray Dalio's new book, How Countries Go Broke: The Big Cycle, explains the mechanics behind big debt crises. Larry Summers says Dalio's brilliant iconoclastic approach is an invaluable resource, and Hank Paulson says it provides a solution to what is the biggest and most certain threat to our prosperity. Read it to understand the greatest economic issue of our time. Available now wherever books are sold.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Eventually, the case of Jonathan's client wound up in front of the Supreme Court. Not the entire case, just the preliminary injunction that had kept Nyo Myint on that military base in Djibouti. The justices ended up allowing the government to fly Myint and 7 other men to South Sudan.
The Supreme Court's order had no explanation. It was just a one-paragraph order canceling the stay that had been implemented by the lower court. It was a 19-page document because it was all dissent written by Justice Sotomayor. But we don't know what the thinking of the Supreme Court, of the majority of the Supreme Court was, because they didn't provide any reasoning. And so what basically happened was, this case that made its way to the Supreme Court, that's still ongoing.
Because this was just about a stay, not about the basis of the actual complaint.
Yeah, this is about a stay as this case continues. So this case is still going on in a Massachusetts district court. But it began back in March, before my client was involved in this process, in the name of individuals mostly from Venezuela who our government is trying to remove to El Salvador. And back in April, that judge issued an injunction basically saying that if our government is going to remove someone to a third country, they must provide some meaningful opportunity for that person to express fear and some process that this fear should be examined for whether it's reasonable. And in the event that they do have a reasonable fear, then there should be mechanisms to prevent that person from being sent to that third country. Now, the judge did not put very specific terms on what that meaningful opportunity meant in his initial injunction, which is basically the loophole that the government charged through to remove my client and these others within hours of them being notified that they were being sent to these third countries.
How quickly was your client then moved to South Sudan?
So that Supreme Court decision came out on a Monday, and he was moved to South Sudan that Thursday.
Right before July 4th?
On the 3rd of July, in the evening before the 4th of July holiday.
Do you still consider your client your client? Have you been able to speak with him since he's been transferred?
I have never spoken with him since he called me from that South Texas detention center, letting me know that he had received paperwork. I am working with a co-counsel on this case, and she was able to briefly speak with him when he was in Djibouti. But once the Supreme Court decision came out on the 23rd, there were no further communications. He never received his interview, and we haven't spoken with him or heard from him since. And we don't know right now, honestly, where he is, what his condition is at all. He is lost, effectively disappeared into South Sudan.
We should say that Border Czar Tom Homan was asked about your client and others and said they're free.
As far as we're concerned, they're free. And
What does
we're
that
working
mean?
with those government. They're no longer in our custody. They're living in Sudan. And will they stay in Sudan? I don't know.
What do you make of a statement like that?
I don't know if we can trust those claims. We don't know, honestly, whether my client and the others who were sent to South Sudan are in the custody of the South Sudanese government. Are they in the custody of the United States government in some sort of black site? I mean, this was in all ways not a removal, not a deportation. This was a rendition, the likes of which we saw in the wake of the invasion of Iraq.
Do you suspect there's some kind of deal between the Trump administration and the government of South Sudan to take in men like your client? Like, do you have any understanding of what the contours of a deal like that might involve?
I have no information at all about that, but it is hard for me to believe that there hasn't been some exchange of funds, of diplomatic, favor, some kind of a pecuniary gain. Perhaps it's the aspiration of a trade deal or avoiding tariffs. But there's no doubt in my mind that there was an exchange, most likely a financial exchange. I mean, look, this is a country that's about to go into civil war. What do they need? They need money. They need guns. And now they're accepting these individuals from the United States. I don't think it was out of the goodness of South Sudan's heart.
So where does that leave someone like you? Because it seems like for your client, what's done is done, and the United States has not provided relief for him. Is there some other entity you can go to seek that relief?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're currently making efforts. I'm currently filing complaints with the United Nations, with several bodies and several mechanisms within the United Nations. We've already opened a case with the Human Rights Committee, and we are making outreach to various working groups within the United Nations. The United States, we traditionally have a history of not perhaps taking the United Nations as seriously, but I'll tell you, other nations do. And you also have the African Commission. And, these African nations are subject and are party to multiple international treaties that have enforcement mechanisms, and they do fall under the jurisdiction of many of these international bodies. You also have the International Criminal Court, which could issue warrants for arrest if indeed what we are experiencing is state-sponsored human trafficking. And so, yes, there could be significant penalties to individuals, including individuals in the United States, for their violations of the law, domestic and international.
Do you think you're ever going to see your client in person again?
That I don't know. My hope is that he can find some place where he will be safe. At this point, it's probably going to be a third country. The chances that he returned to the United States are low. He cannot return to his home country, and he should not remain in the country where he is. My hope for him is that he finds some place to be safe.
I've heard a few attorneys begin to talk about a dual state developing in the U.S. The idea of a dual state was popularized among historians after Nazi Germany. And the idea is that for a good deal of time, Germany's legal system operated pretty well for most people. Things seemed relatively normal, and very poorly for marginalized people. And then eventually the whole system began to operate less well for more and more people, which raises this possibility that right now we're in this in-between place where things are beginning to operate less well for certain kinds of people, but it puts the country at large at risk. And I wonder if you think about that dual state idea in this moment.
I don't know whether I think about it as a dual state. I think about it as a new state, right? What we're seeing right now is not the breaking of our system. It is the emergence of a whole new system. This can happen quickly. And I think that, my admonishment or the bell that I am ringing, the alarm that I am sounding, is that the more we stand by and watch and explain every little step that is being taken and explaining it away under some kind of bureaucratic mumbo jumbo, the greater the peril that we are creating, because these things happen slowly at the beginning and then all at once. If we allow our government to create this system of apprehending anybody anywhere for any reason and holding people en masse in militarized camps that are not subject to any court jurisdiction, and then removing people within hours of notification. Once you've got that infrastructure created, you are just the flip of a switch away from internalizing that. And now you are talking about whistleblowers, journalists, dissidents.
Immigration attorneys.
Immigration attorneys. Anyone who is seen as opposing or not towing the line could be thrown into that system. And it doesn't have to happen to many people. It would only have to happen to a few people to send a chill throughout the entire country.
Jonathan, I'm really grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Jonathan Ryan is an immigration attorney. He is based in San Antonio, Texas. He also writes the Substack Firewall. If you want to hear more about the legal limbo immigrants are in right now, check out this week's Death, Sex, and Money. Host Anna Sale talks to an undocumented woman and her Trump-supporting husband. That conversation is called The Honeymoon That Ended in Immigration Detention. And you can find it by searching Death, Sex, and Money in your podcatcher of choice. And that's our show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, Ethan Oberman, and Madeline Ducharme. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Go track me down on Blue Sky. I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.
Good crews don't wait around for help, but the smart ones don't turn it down either. The James Hardie Alliance gives you what actually matters. Training that sharpens your team, resources that keep jobs moving, and leads from interested homeowners. That's the sound of fuel for your business, and it costs nothing to join. Get more from the work you're already doing. Learn more at jameshardie.com/alliance.